Welcome to the upstreamlife.com. I'm your founder and editor, Vishal Krishna. I love talking technology. I love talking transformation. But technology transformation should be outcome driven. And this is what my next guest is going to talk about. I've got Srividya of Avaali, and Avaali has been here for 11 years. They're into the business of transformation. But what are we going to talk about?
I'm sure a bunch of topics
Yes.
over the conversation. I think how technology is actually working
Yeah, in
terms of
organizations.
organizations of
Absolutely.
tomorrow, how it's going to be relevant for organizations
Correct.
of tomorrow, how organizations are adopting technologies from an
Change,
operational business process,
change management perspective.
Yeah, people, the culture, the process.
And your favorite subject, AI, and how to use it for outcomes and not just for narrative, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Enjoy the podcast, guys. Thank you. Srividya, great to see you. It's been 7 years, but boy, have you built a company, 300 people, 250 clients. Avaali is the name. What is Avaali? For our audience to know what Avaali does.
Yeah. Awesome. Wonderful to be here, Vishal, firstly, and pleasure to be here, interacting with you. So, Ava in Sanskrit is breath of life, and Avaali is a variation of that term. Essentially, what we do is to help companies to collaborate and function better. And, we have a beautiful logo, the butterfly and the rose, which is representative of the fact that collaboration is inherent in nature.
Yes.
Life is all about collaboration. Nothing can be done in isolation. Essentially, the genesis to the organization is that coming back from my various experiences, and by the way, I started off in finance, transitioning to IT. One of the realizations was that large enterprises do invest a lot in technology, but typically unstructured content and workflows within business processes are very manual driven. So essentially, if we take a look at any business process within an organization, there are elements of documents, there are emails, there are, all kinds of knowledge being shared within and outside the organization, and all of that knowledge is somewhere lost in transit.
Absolutely.
And this knowledge is in fact an enterprise's core asset, which is somewhere, I think, very, very diluted because it is not captured anywhere. So one of the things we decided to focus is to look at this unstructured content and workflows, automate the unstructured content lifecycle of business processes, which essentially constitutes 80% of any business process has elements of unstructured content. So, automate that, integrate that with structured data applications, such as your ERP, CRM, HRMS, and so on, so that end-to-end business processes are automated. With the intended outcomes of cycle time reduction, cost reduction, margin improvements to business. So in that context, and given my finance background, and looking at any enterprise's P&L, if we take a look at the expense line items in P&L, we decided to stay focused on operational business processes within an enterprise's P&L. So what I mean by operational process is essentially any line item in the expense side of a P&L, which is say minus of manufacturing and to some extent R&D and quality. So aspects of sourcing, procurement, supply chain, HR, contracts and legal, sales, marketing processes, essentially to look at these expense line items in the operational side of a P&L, to automate that with a confluence of technologies and to offer an end-to-end, functional business process, which is, with the outcome of superior governance, compliance, and cost. So that's essentially Avaali for you in a nutshell.
Interesting. That's a good one. The world is different today compared to 2013 when you started. It's been 11 years.
Yes.
And 11 years have gone by in a breeze, just like we haven't met in 7 years. The interesting aspect is these are the points that you made. I mean, a lot of unstructured data in 13 gave birth to a lot of this questioning around, can we use these digital assets to convert text into readable format faster, better across organizations? But the technologies have changed with them.
Absolutely.
And so your knowledge of using a particular tool or setting up the process is what you built the company on.
Yes.
Right? How different is the world today compared to then?
Massively different. And I think, the amount of learning that I have had maybe in the last 3 years would be far more than the learning I've had throughout my entire career.
You want to explain why?
Yeah, I think the world has, changed. Thinking has changed, especially given I would say in the last 3 years since the pandemic. I think a lot of the stuff that we have taken for granted is something that has been you know, suddenly, I would say it's turned around on its head, right? I mean, whoever imagined that we would have to transition working from home almost overnight? Whoever imagined a world of this nature where everything has to happen almost remotely for several years until we now return back to office?
Yeah.
The whole aspect of resilience has been, has seen a huge, question mark. How resilient are we to adapt
To these
to
global
this,
shocks, yeah.
not only the global shocks, but I would say, I mean, look at AI, and you look at the way technology has actually massively, I would say, um, grown. I mean, look at the humongous pace at which technology has grown in the last 2 years. I mean, and month
Yeah.
on month, I think. I mean, whoever imagined? No, GPT-4 came out in such a fast pace, and the outcomes, what's being delivered by GPT-4 now versus GPT-3, and the huge shift in terms of what is now possible with some of these technologies. And that does not necessarily mean only an influence on how companies work, but that translates to every bit of our society, every bit of our community, every bit of humankind, actually. I mean, look at
For the
how,
better or worse,
I would think,
or realignment total.
perhaps
Yeah.
the realignment, I think, is what it is. Better or worse is hard to determine, but hopefully for the better. And we can keep questioning how this is all going to turn out for humankind. And so there are aspects of privacy, ethics, this whole
Absolutely.
concept of hallucinations of AI, deep fakes, and authenticity. Tell me about authenticity. I mean, that is something that is all work in progress, driven by, I would say, regulations, the way governments are accelerating the pace to regulation, the way companies are actually looking at, on the one side, how AI could be disruptive, but also really influence business growth. How it could influence the way business is conducted. What are the implications for their people? How should people be retrained to suit the new world order? And how is it going to influence society at large? And look at how children are studying today. Look at AI being embedded everywhere today. You go to Google search, you already have an AI mechanism whereby you don't have to toggle through multiple search outcomes to then decide which one is correct for you. I mean, you already have a help with that with AI. So I would think the world is, massively changing. So coming back to my point, last 3 years, the amount I've learned, I've not learned in my entire career. So the way, so I'm, back to school, back to basics. And I realized that this is the way the world is going to be. And if every one of us, and starting from me and every one of my team members and every one of us do not learn from each other,
it's going to be tough, right?
It's going to be very tough.
Let's talk about this from the client perspective, because you've always told me that you're outcome driven as an organization. You don't use fancy terms. We'll talk about those fancy terms in a bit. ChatGPT and outcome driven. How are organizations struggling? For example, when the corona happened, I think there weren't many GPT users. But the last 18 months, I've seen an acceleration across organizations. For example, building boilerplate code. There's an existential crisis for content writing, but there is an opportunity for large-scale content. I mean, thinking in terms of liberating people to think. Yes, that is happening. But at the low end, right, all the services are getting commoditized, and ChatGPT is going to beat everybody, including developers, including writers, including script writers. It's changing a lot. Musicians as well. How do your clients work with Avaali? Of course, how do they understand ChatGPT, and how do you use it from their context at this point of time across the board? Because you work with retail, manufacturing, across the board of industry.
Yeah.
So what is the transformation? Should I call it transformation even? You're saying don't look at these terms.
Yeah.
What does an organization want?
Yeah, I would rather focus on what outcomes we're trying to solve, and how we get to that is the next question. But if we use terms like transformation, like digital, before we actually figure out what kind of goals are we supposed to accomplish, I think it's like, it's not going to meet the purpose. So first, looking at what outcomes we basically solve cost reduction, margin improvement themes for large enterprises around operational business process.
Okay.
And like I listed out, these the operational processes in the expense line item in a P&L, which essentially constitutes, a significant component of any enterprise's expenses in their P&Ls. 40 to 70% cycle time reduction and cost reduction is what we have enabled for over 300 plus large enterprises.
Absolutely.
Using a confluence of technologies. We operate via 3 pillars. Essentially, we have a global business services or shared services pillar, whereby we help organizations create or mature their operating model, their GBS operating model, which is a very powerful model when done and executed correctly. With a proper vision and direction aligned to the overall management thinking, embedding elements of cultural change that's required within the organization, but amplified via a confluence of emerging technologies. It can present a very super powerful operating model for organizations to reduce cost. So we help companies do the roadmap building for their captive GBSs. To be clear, we don't run the business process.
Yes.
We don't provide people who actually execute the business process, but we leverage the organization's their own people to run that to-be process, which has been designed and agreed together with them. And
give me an example. Best illustrated with an example.
So we did this for the largest FMCG in East Africa, which has got a 52% market share in edible oils and soaps. And this company is an amazing, I would say, success story because of the clarity of thought that they had when they decided to adopt this operating model. It was a board-driven decision. They were clear that this operating model is going to add value to the company. They decided to take it at scale. We came in there as a consulting
for the supply chain part, or entire from
across the board So this is the beauty of it.
Yes.
They decided to adopt it at scale on day one, rather than take it piecemeal and then build it up.
Absolutely. Most of them would do that. Yeah.
No right or wrong answers. I think it depends on the culture and the ability of the organization where they are in their life cycle.
So the problem statement was there's a lot of unstructured data again, or was it different?
So the problem statement was that business processes were being executed at different locations by different people. There were SOPs, but they were not being adhered to. Yeah. Governance and compliance was becoming a challenge, and there was a lot of redundancy in the process. There was a lot of cost takeouts and potential that they could visualize and was evident, and that's something they wanted to realize, those cost takeouts. So we came in there as a consulting partner, defined the roadmap for them, and help them choose the right technology. And we just don't leave them with a blueprint because that's hard to execute. We want to walk the talk and deliver that outcome for them. So these are typically anywhere between 12 to 36 month long engagements, and even following that, we continue to stay handholded, support, ongoing enhancements.
So they'll listen to you to use new applications. There's a new code being built across the board. So perhaps they're on Microsoft, perhaps on Oracle, maybe on Amazon, AWS, all those kind of in-house servers. Maybe they have on the cloud. So rationalizing all that, is that what you did?
Yes. So a lot of this is in some sense non-existent typically. Okay. We always help organizations leverage what they have already invested in, and then support them with identifying what kind of gaps are there and how they can fill the gap, what kind of additional technologies there is, how do they choose the right technology. But once they made that decision, then we help them to walk the talk and actually deliver that implementation for them. So that's what I mean by we just don't leave them with a blueprint. We actually deliver that. We implement those solutions for them.
Okay, for the edible oil company, obviously, when I look at it's also a lot of content away, right? There's data in the ERP, there's data in the CRM, there's data across warehouse solutions and warehouse management systems, and there's also fleet management in a way, I'm sure. So would you rationalize something of all this and the gaps here?
As long as it's relevant for the process. Okay. So if they are bringing in sourcing or procurement, or the procure to pay, or aspects of record to report, or aspects of collections, contracts. In this case, they also decided to bring in vendor
management,
HR,
vendors.
Yeah, HR, vendor onboarding, AP, AR, FI, as some aspects of treasury. So this was a really, I would say, a very nice implementation, also led by the board and its clear vision with respect to setting up their captives. So this was a 2-year long engagement with them.
Give us the economics on you, because you said 70% cycle time
Yes,
saved.
It's incredible that when done well, what kind of outcomes it can.
Please.
It is very powerful, because when we finished the implementation sometime in mid of 2018, and it's a part of the ongoing governance. So we're always with our clients for a long period of time, as in we don't just come in, have a point intervention and move out, because that kind of, while it's good, that may not be a very long-term sustainable approach. So we are always partnering with our client in the long run. So we did the same thing for this organization. In fact, to date, we are actually, working with them, partnering with them for their requirements. And in September of 2020, as a part of one of the governances, when we were just doing a reevaluation of what kind of and how is it continuing to benefit them, it was incredible to see, and they gave us a written testimonial to the extent of 40% reduction in due payment approval process, to the extent of 70% reduction in something like a master data process, when implemented, executed, deployed, and adopted well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Technology is, one part of it is making that decision for investment. The second part of it is going live on that. And I think these two are basically largely table stakes. Many companies even struggle with that, but assuming that these are table stakes, the bigger challenge is actually deploying it, and when the rubber hits the road, for companies to adopt it, make the change happen. Because many of these organizations have been in existence for several decades.
Yeah, I would think of people that people struggle with adopting SAP in those days. They had to be retrained. So in the ChatGPT era, for example, how would they adopt themselves?
I think,
let's keep this edible oil thing handy, because they can probably relate to it.
Yeah. I think it is change management.
It is. So you have to advise them in change management, is it?
Yes, we do. The end of the day, the people who are actually users of that solution need to see a purpose in using it, and need to see a win in it for themselves. If they believe that this is going to cannibalize their jobs,
which
then
is what
they are going to sabotage it, which is not healthy.
I've seen that happen with SAP in Coimbatore clusters. A lot of the automotive shops which had implemented SAP, 6 months down the line, they would be complaining, saying we aren't using it. Though, I mean, this is many years ago. But how in the ChatGPT era, I think that's taken away, right? Because you're automating everything where people really can't rebel against it.
And
right?
I don't. No.
Just a thought. You could go on.
ChatGPT.
Because most of it is automated, right? Because people like you come in, and you advise, and you also enable the implementation aspect of it, and people have to get used to it now.
Yes, they need to adopt it, and they need to, and it cannot be always a push approach. A carrot and stick approach. It cannot be largely a stick. It has to be. They have to want it, and that is the harder part. I would say messaging, communication is very important from day one. How it is messaged, how they see a win in it, how they are part of that outcome, how they are part of that change.
Yeah.
And that's one part of it, which is very, very important. The other part is for them to understand how to use it, and hopefully with all these aspects of democratization of technology, there is a lot of democratization of technology. Technology is getting easier to work with. And especially now that we speak about AI, right from our, a small school-going child who is actually leveraging a chatbot or a GPT to write homework. So they don't really look at the mechanics of how that really works. They don't need to know what is, how that code needs to be written. As long as it's like an AI for every user. It's like a genie.
Is it getting there in the industry?
Yes, I'm sure it's getting there very fast.
So I'll tell you why. I have a couple of thoughts. In 2019, I used to meet a lot of these. Those days, this chatbot thing was a rage, right? Where I used to meet these retail tech companies, and they say, "Hey, so and so, can you tell me what are the sales in the Minnesota region, and by this, this district?"
Yeah.
or this in this part of the city or suburb, right? And they would have these demos where the AI would tell you, okay, this is what it was, and you could probably go in by category. They hadn't gotten by category yet, or at least can tell you store level stuff. Then ChatGPT has come in and just blown that off the window, where it's completely democratized, where it's on the fly. But organizations will struggle for that change management, and that's where people like you come in and say you don't have to worry.
I think data is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of, where is the data? What is the training data? What is there an underlying, bias in the data? Is that data something that can be used? Aspects of privacy, I think data. I think data is going to be extremely crucial. What we can do with the data, there's a lot now that we can do with the data.
So if you're talking about it, then it's more enabling of people, right? People make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Why is this a fear about losing jobs? Why is that being spoken about a lot more?
Yeah, because I think because they run the process. I mean, that's the way they have been doing it for several decades. And many of these are very large organizations which have been in existence for several decades. And there are people who have been working there for
So that's why you're saying cost center versus outcome today.
Yeah.
Right? They were a cost center, right? But they were efficient cost centers in a way.
It's still a cost center.
Okay.
It's still a cost center.
Okay.
It's still a cost center. But the way that they are going to run the process
is
going to be very different.
And they have to be trained for that.
They have to be retrained. And I think the sooner an organization is able to manage its talent to that reality of what's going to hit,
This is
and it's a hard problem to solve. It's not an easy one. It's a pretty complex problem to solve.
It's a good opportunity for you, right? People will probably work with your company to say, look, I have these process changes that I have to make. Don't just advise me, but be there with me in this journey.
And I keep saying, I keep getting asked this question: who is your competition? And I think those questions are now almost redundant, because if you look at any large SI, Tier 1 SI, Tier 2 SI, Tier 3 SI, niche players, boutique firms, if you take all of this ecosystem together and try to address the opportunity there is, we will still be falling short of hands. So I don't see there is no threat anymore. So that's why collaboration becomes more important.
Explain, because you said falling short of hands, because I was about to get into competition, SIs and all these niche players in the software space, and also consulting space. I want to put that in as well. So what makes you different? What makes you different? The consulting companies, I know, they come and tell you what to do, they give you the blueprint, and they don't want anything to do with the execution. Here, you're not only giving the blueprint, but you're hand-holding these companies, right? How different is it from the SIs try to talk about that nowadays?
Yeah.
But they also struggle. I've seen it. They're large teams themselves. They themselves need transformation, right? I mean, doing it with 300 people and 300 companies, it's fantastic. So what makes you different?
I think our deep understanding of functional business process. We are a very niche, I would say, provider of addressing that element of margin improvement in the operational business process side. We do that and we do nothing else. We are not in the revenue side, so we don't do customer experience, e-commerce, we don't do that. We are not in the manufacturing side, we are not an IoT industry 4.0 player. We don't do much work on R&D and quality, but the stuff that we address it very deeply, and that is our strength. And that's why we have large enterprise customers, the who's who of almost, very large enterprises across the markets we serve. We have a pretty good footprint of customers for whom we have delivered a good amount of cost reduction and cycle time reduction across these operational process. I think there are two things that I would say are key differentiators. One is our deep understanding of how these processes really work, which is extremely crucial before we can find out, before we can tell them how they can improvise and how they can actually bring down cost for those processes. The second is our understanding of digital technology, the emerging technologies. So again, coming to the tech stack, we don't do much work. We don't do any work on the ERP, CRM, HRMS. While we have, for instance, a BAPers for when we have address SAP install account, we have a large ABAP pool which can actually address those customizations, but we don't do work on the structured data side. We are focused completely on the unstructured content side of the business. So I think that kind of niche really helps us to create our differentiator.
And that unstructured data can again be in, let's define, in the old days, unstructured data was called social data, But today, I mean, if you look at a warehouse company, a lot of it is in documents, text. There are multiple formats, right? There's a PDF. There may be a Word doc.
Exactly.
Right?
An email,
Yeah, an
a
email also,
contract, a document, have vendor invoices, you have travel expense documents, you have HR documentation, you have right from a JD through to resumes, through to interview feedback forms, through to, annotations put on workflow approvals. There are no audit trails of those workflows. There's information lying all over the place in an
And to
organization.
rationalize that is hard.
Yeah, to basically get that around, to create that information as an asset. So really the question is, can business process be a source of comparative advantage?
It is, which is what you're offering, right?
Exactly. So
A lot of people would put teams and teams of like BPOs. They'd put 10,000 people to annotate this data. How do you do it with 300? That is my question.
I think
It's interesting.
technology is solving the scaling problem. I think so we work a lot with emerging technologies, and of course, I mean, without technology, there is
You can scale.
you cannot scale.
That's the truth of it. Srividya, I wanted to talk about, so that's where organizations are headed. I can't believe 10 years down, we're still talking unstructured data. That means a lot of these...
unstructured content within processes.
So you earlier said don't talk about capability centers or cost centers. Why are people coming into India so seriously? I mean, there's a lot of data that, the number of GCCs
I think
will
India
double.
presents a humongous potential because of 3 or 4 reasons. One is we have a fantastic talent pool of functional experts. We have people who understand how to run those business processes. So, we have a good talent pool around that. Digital talent pool is extremely good for India as a marketplace. If we talk about the real estate, the availability of space, where these people can actually benefit in terms of cost reductions coming into and leveraging our, that real estate is humongous, And if we talk about leveraging of technologies to drive the transformation, then we are ready, out there. So I think, from an opportunity perspective across worldwide, of course, GCCs, GBS, it's not a new concept. It's been in existence for over 2+ decades. Like AI has been in existence for 5 decades. It's nothing new, We have seen, right from the, Deep Blue and Gary Kasparov to, what
from 96 onwards. Yes, it's always been around.
I think for the last 4-5 decades, I mean, it's been there. So GBS has also been there for a long time, but I would say increasingly captive GBS and delivering those captive GBSs with a confluence of technologies that is seeing a humongous amount of interest given that cost, and as coming back to our topic of resilience. Enterprises realize that yes, growth is an important agenda, but something that we cannot entirely control given so much of challenges around the world with respect to geopolitical issues, wars, and the Red Sea issue suddenly coming from somewhere, and then all of this, so growth is important and absolutely very, very important, one of our top agendas, but that's something you can't entirely control. But cost is something that is within our control because that's the way our processes are run. So coming back, can business process be a source of competitive advantage? And that's where we are getting to. If you can make your own business process a source of competitive advantage, build resilience within the organizations so that irrespective of the market situation outside, you're able to deliver that process at much lower cost, at far more predictable outcomes with a sense of governance, transparency, and visibility into that process. That's what we're really looking at. And that is something they know that they can control because it's within their own home, right? I mean, what's within your home, you can control. So I think that's really leading to India as a destination for several of these captive GBSs, and we've seen, of course, media covering it in a frenzy. Almost even today, CT actually has in the front page on GCC.
And I think, but you called it out. It's all about outcome.
Yeah.
Okay. Vidya, I mean, we talk about so many American companies coming in or European companies coming in. We also talk about Dubai as a region or Middle East, like you say. When the prospects come into India, what do they want? I mean, the talent pool we just spoke about, brilliant talent. How do you work with them?
Yeah, well, in many cases, we reach out to these companies. Okay, and it's not, and we, basically conceptualize.
So they don't know the
together.
India story, or they know the
They
India
do.
story, but they want to come in. They don't know when to start.
There
or
are
what-
various
yeah.
facets of
Okay.
that. Some people are very clear about setting up a GBS here. Many of the organizations still view that as an opportunity. They are on the borderlines, but several other organizations have a lot of that learning curve. They are curious, so they need to be, I would say, evangelized. This
So you
whole
have to go
concept
talk,
has
is
to
it?
be evangelized and discussed, and they need to understand what kind of outcomes are possible and how it's possible. But I would say, in general, most organization and most customers, we learn from our customers more than we can ever give them back, and that's the reality. Because I think most organizations and most C-suite stakeholders within those organizations are extremely well connected. They are very well read, and they have a purpose and a mission. And it is exciting for us to go interact with them, understand what kind of goals they may be looking at, and how we can be a part of that outcome-driven engagement. So when we reach them and we present to them the possibilities of what kind of journeys are possible when they're looking at this kind of an operating model with GBS, and how they can really leverage digital technologies to make it less labor and manual intensive and more, build resilience within the organization. There is a lot of engagement and dialogue and discussion for us to actually present the possibility, get into the depth, understand the way they are functioning right now, what kind of volumes are there, and there is a lot of discussion and workshops and so on, and eventually we come to defining a roadmap for them, and then walk the talk, then deliver that implementation for them once they have chosen the right technologies. We do actually
advise them on the technologies. Of course.
we do provide them with guidance on what kind of technologies are available, what do they already have that they can make use of, and what else do they need over and above that.
And by the way, you're not a staffing company. A lot of people think, oh, will you now get us the talent and all that? No.
We don't really do that. We believe that there is a lot of existing talent pool that can be leveraged. We do leverage our networks and connects to, because when they're setting up a GBS here, there is the whole org structure, the GBS leader. So we do have our networks, given that we've done like over 150 plus GBSs, captive GBSs of varying levels of maturity. Across industry segments, we do have good connections that we can put them across with. But no, we are not really, a staffing organization that actually helps them to.
Got it. That's fantastic. So, what's the timeline? In a sense, they become clients because you said it's a lot of, selling in terms of communicating with them, saying that this is the advantage, and then they come in. And they come in and say, look, can you run it for us? Can you work with our leaders to implement these technologies? Is that the typical way you work?
Yeah, we do multiple models. We help them set it up. We implement technologies for them. We do the trainings, change management, enablements, handholding, support over a period of time. A typical sales cycle to convert a deal is an average of about 4 to 6 months. And thereafter, a typical engagement cycle is anywhere between 6 to 18 months.
Wow.
Depending on the level of maturity and depth, of to-be processes which are involved as a part of the.
Once you set the processes for 2 years, do they become your client again, or you're just done with that?
No, like I mentioned, once we get engaged with an account, once we sign up an account, we partner with them for a long period of time. It's not only for that specific requirement, but there will be ongoing engagements.
What is it about support? Technology again, or
it could be about technology, it could be about process, it could be about change management, it could be about trainings, it could be about incremental processes they want to get within their GPS. So these engagements are pretty long term, and for example, most companies that we engaged with in 2015-16, early part of our journey, they're still our clients.
Okay. Why have you remained agnostic? That's a question that I had. Agnostic of industry. You work in retail, manufacturing suddenly.
Yes.
Is it because the processes are the same?
Exactly. We work a lot in the operational business process. 80% of a process or an operational process is pretty much the same across industries. When we talk about HR, we speak about contracts, or we speak about AP, accounts payable, an invoice to pay process.
Yes.
It's pretty industry agnostic. So So that's why we're touching operational business process
Mm.
across industries, because 80% of our process is typically industry agnostic.
How much do they spend, a typical organized, like a retail conglomerate, on this operation, on this P&L line items? What, they spend millions of dollars on maintenance of all this? Because there's information lost, because there's time. People have to factor the time. Have you put a map around saying, okay, this is the time we can save for you, this is how it's going to go digital, and that's what they appreciate? The CFOs who take this decision, or the C-suite, whoever your stakeholder is?
Cycle time is what, 40% cycle time reduction is what we enable. So if a company would execute a process over, say, 10 days to process, say, 60,000 plus invoices that they may be doing per annum, for instance, and it takes them maybe 10 resources to do it, they could do with 4 resources with
reduce days,
with technology,
with
yes,
5 days,
and
maybe.
they could repurpose those resources to doing more intelligent activities. So basically,
Very well said.
40 to 60%, 40 to 70% cycle time reduction and associated cost reduction is what we.
It's very interesting, because a client of mine would say that we use technology to increase outcomes and reduce time, which would be in the healthcare space. Apparently, a payer would take 7 days previously. Now they've reduced it 3 days with tech, and you can process even more, PDFs coming in or whatever. It's very interesting how technology has enabled this, and that's where you come in.
Correct.
So, and these are P&L items, and you can definitely say that we've saved you this much.
Yes, but there are customer validated case studies, because when anyone wants to invest in these kind of technologies, or business case or something, even we support them to build those business cases, those justifications, the ROIs, and that needs to be delivered. So we have numerous customer case studies, and we do a lot of webinars where we involve these customers to come and speak about the transformation journey, so that and we actually built this community called Janus in LinkedIn. It's a user group community in the source to pay area, which is fairly unique, because the kind of innovation possibilities in the sourcing, procurement, supply chain areas that I have seen companies take in the last 2 years, 2.5 years, I have not seen before. So to build this thought leadership of how organizations worldwide are doing it, and just to present those ideas to other stakeholders, we built this user group. It's completely free for our customers. So it's a very recent initiative, about
very interesting,
12 or 15 months long, and we have got about 750, 800 plus members in that. We are planning to build that user
and
group.
that becomes your sales funnel in a way.
Yes, but I think it goes beyond just sales. I think it's meant for a purpose to actually drive thought leadership in the space for people to learn from one another. I think its purpose is far more deeper. We also have a publication. It's called Illuminar.
Okay.
It's seen over 9+ years.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. You're the editor of that. You say, well, it's interesting. We talk about that. But so that's for the procurement industry.
That is across for digital stories, the digital the outcomes that enterprises have delivered via digital, via adopting digital tools and technology.
I'm going to check that out for sure. And the LinkedIn community is called
Janus.
Janus?
Janus.
Okay, it's like the Greek god or something of that sort. Yeah, correct. So the interesting aspect is you're doing all this, and the stakeholder definitely is between all these stakeholders: CEO, CFO, CHRO, Chief Security Officer. Different companies have different stakeholders coming into the table and talking to you. How does that work?
Yes,
who takes the decision finally?
Depending on which business process we speak about.
Say in retail, you have a retail customer.
Yes,
I like retail and automotive.
We engage with anywhere between 7 to 15 stakeholders in any enterprise account that we work with. So if it has got to do with GBS, I'm definitely a CFO and their respective teams under them would definitely be key stakeholders. Or if it's the GBS being set up for functional processes like a accounts payable or in R2R process, or for procurement processes, and the chief procurement officer is going to be involved, and IT is always there. Chief supply chain officer is going to be there, depending on which business process we touch, or if it's for HR or treasury, depending on which business process, those respective stakeholders are required to, we need to have buy-in from those stakeholders and to also get them to provide us with their wish list or their thinking, because end of the day they're going to benefit from it. And
it's change management coming down to the same thing, right?
Correct.
That means the organization should be on that roadmap that they should
Yes.
have discussed this internally.
Yes.
Many a time would it be something like clairvoyance where you have to go tell them that, look, you have to do this? Has that happened?
I don't think so. I think for the customer base we speak to on an for the
These are
large enterprise.
$100 million plus companies.
No, they are
yeah?
typically 300, 350 plus million
That's
dollars
quite mid-size.
company base. I think these companies are fairly mature. I don't think we need to tell them what to do, but they are, especially for serious transformations outcomes that they want achieved. Yeah, I think they pretty much know what kind of stakeholders to involve, but it's important to get everyone on the same page.
Got it. Okay, as a leader, he said 10 years, lots have changed in India and globally. What should be some of the things that we should be cognizant of? We spoke ChatGPT and the impact that will have on the realignment of the way people work. That's a separate conversation. That's one thing you called out. What are some of the things that organizations should of the future? I mean, they see a lot of startups are nimble. They're digital first. A lot of the older organizations that have built 100 million or 300 million companies, 300 million in revenue companies, they have an existential crisis of having a lot of people, but struggling with change management. That's another thing that you've called out. What are the top 5 things that somebody has to manage as a C-suite going forward in an organization, especially in the 100 million plus range?
I think first is to actually look at where are the redundancies, what kind of, how can you really build a resilient organization
you
which
called
is
that out
adaptable
too.
to any kind of external or internal changes. How can irrespective of whatever happens, a supplier invoice be processed? Irrespective of whatever happens, the collections happen on time. Irrespective of whatever happens, a talent pool is adequately engaged. How do you ensure that your legal and contracts are visible across the organization? The latest version of that is available and is visible and is a single source of truth. How do you know that the right information should be in the right hands, and there should be no tampering of information. So there is a lot of resilience, that story.
So you have to internally be strong then. You have to create these changes, each piece taken. Like you said, there has to be transparency in contracts. Information shouldn't be lost. It has to be available across
there is
departments.
And there's a lot of digital play in each one of these.
Okay, so they have to be cognizant of that change.
Yes, there's a lot of digital.
It's a great opportunity for you, but leaders watching this should realize that the change happens today, and they all know it. But the resistance to change from their existing leadership, at what point they change, what will happen, say 5 years down the line? It's going to be a rapidly fast world, or do you see a lot of companies being acquired by these nimble companies? What type of a world do you see with the geopolitical situation? Everyone's saying China plus, India, suddenly it's a geopolitical thing that India has to get into a lot of GCCs. These terms I'm going to bring in: capability centers, business centers, excellence centers, whatever. Apart from all this narrative, what is the real value for companies to come to India? I mean, the talent, yes, but transformation, they have to figure out, right? They have to figure out change management, like you said.
That's going to be, I would say, common across organizations. That change management is something that is going to be there, something that they have to live with. That has always been the case, but more so today, especially because of what are the sheer possibilities with digital. But India presents a fabulous opportunity for many of these organizations to set up their back office operations more in a captive format because of how they can execute this process, leveraging technologies. And given our talent pool, like I said, the functional talent pool, the digital talent pool that is available in abundance, the locations that are available, which are able to, give that kind of facilities to these companies to set up their base at a much lower cost, and for these processes to be delivered in almost an automated fashion, leveraging emerging technologies.
Do you think we have to worry about AI as India, and it's because you called it out, talent pool, great leaders? Do you think AI will be an enabler, or do you see that as something that's really going to change the way people are trained in schools and colleges, for example, before they come to work? How will that impact?
I think it will impact every industry, every human, every society. I think it's going to impact every job. It's going to have a massive impact over a period of time. That's for sure. And
Wow.
And the world of the future will be looking very incredibly different. And that's going to happen sooner than we can ever think. I mean,
yeah, I can already see that happening in the media industry.
Yeah.
And I think organizations listening to this podcast, I think they have to view this seriously. I don't know how seriously. I mean, for that, you need to have a private conversation with Vidya, right? Vidya, but tell me, okay, going back to easier stuff where when I met you 7 years ago, you were only 50 to 70 members as an organization, 300 people, you've served 300 organizations. How do you keep sane as a leader to build a company of the future? You're almost like holding people's hands, I mean, our company's hands, and taking them towards the future. How do you build an organization like that? I mean, what motivates you? What keeps you going?
I think that the purpose actually fuels a lot of the energy. And it is the sheer excitement of delivering that outcome and seeing that outcome being delivered as a result of our engagement that actually fuels a lot of our energy. So a deeper sense of purpose is why I built this organization, or I could have continued my career journey for where
as a
I was.
finance person, and now you're tech.
As a finance or a tech person, I could have continued for a very long time. And the companies I've worked with have fortunately treated me extremely well. I couldn't have asked for more. If it was just about living a good life and doing something worthwhile, yes, there are always possibilities. But I think there was
that leap was important for you.
It was very important for me. I think the amount of learning I've had in the last about 10 years, I mean, since I set it up, or 11 years, I couldn't have ever imagined that kind of learning is even possible if I had continued my journey,
So what would be a company? I mean, is it more people for you, or is more IP for you? Or it'll be a combination of two. Will it be a 1,000-member company and then, X and X IP?
Our vision for the future?
Yeah.
Okay, it'll be led by both, I would think. But we already have an IP called Velocious, which is a sourcing and supplier collaboration solution, which automates the life cycle of RFI, RFX, and P2P, procure-to-pay processes for organizations. So
that's your own IP?
That's our own IP, and we launched it in August of 2020. And several large companies, run it today, including...
is it a SaaS kind of product, or is it
It's available on SaaS as well as on-prem. Both versions are available. It is ERP agnostic, and this is something that, we started taking to market effective August of 2020. But there are a lot of surround processes and tasks which still require a lot of emerging technologies. And so we use a confluence of these technologies to drive that transformation ahead. And as I suspect, we have product engineering teams. We will continue to invest heavily in that product and the possibilities around that, even leveraging AI and what kind of outcomes can be delivered with clients, several of these business processes.
Interesting. Okay. On the personal front, music or books or art or all of them, or what? Any recommendations for this?
I read a lot. Well, a lot is, quantifiable. I
read a lot in your perspective. You do read a lot, so why not? Go on.
So the book that I'm reading right now, it's called The Artist's Way. Julia Cameron. It's an amazing book about creativity. I think as we go along, there is I would say the thing that I am most fascinated with is ideas and authenticity. There is a lot of content and hype around.
Yeah.
So where do you bring in that element of creativity and originality and authenticity to be relevant for the world of tomorrow? I think that's most important. And how can we really get there? So I think, with that purpose, I have started reading this book. I think it's giving some amazing tips.
The
Artist's Way, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Julia Cameron, you said.
Yes, right? Yes.
No, that's a good recommendation. It's a very, I'm glad you didn't recommend one of these startup books. I'm so happy. A lot of people do that. And what else? Music?
Yeah. No, I do read the Upanishads. So Message of the Upanishads is another
That's something I must get into. I've read the Puranas, but parts of it, but I need to get into. So what's the takeaway from there?
Katha, Isha, Kena Upanishad, and the messages underlying
and I heard these are great stories, no?
I think the message...
the message. Go on. What are the messages there? Some of them. What's the best thing that influenced you? If you can
I'm still learning, I would say. I'm still learning. There is a lot of relevance of those several thousands of years back messages still prevalent for
Today.
the world of
Yeah.
today and humankind of today, and the way we live, the way we think, the way we interact, and how
The technology changes, but the mind is similar, right, for all humans. I think that's what the Upanishads talk about in many ways,
Yes.
right? It's so true. Great. So it's wonderful talking to you. I'd love to have you back for more, and enjoy the podcast. And if you want to know what transformation from an outcome perspective means, get on a call with us. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Vishal. Wonderful
you.
interacting with you.
Thank you.